The Grand Illusion, the operating manual for being human. They never gave you a complete guide to understanding why you do what you do, why others do what they do, and how to finally take control of your own life. Introduction. The manual you were never handed. Let me start with something that might sting a little. You have never been given an instruction manual for your own mind. Think about that for a moment. Everything else in your life comes with instructions. Your smartphone has a 200-page guide. Your coffee maker has a troubleshooting section. Even your shampoo bottle tells you exactly what to do. But your mind, the most complex piece of equipment you will ever operate? Nothing. Nobody sat you down and explained how your thoughts generate emotions, how those emotions drive your actions, and how those actions create the reality you live in every single day. Here's why this matters more than you might think. The quality of your entire life, every relationship, every career move, every moment of peace or anxiety is determined by what happens inside your head. Your emotions color everything. When you feel good, the world looks full of possibility. Food tastes better, people seem friendlier, problems look like challenges you can handle. But when you feel low, that exact same world becomes dull, threatening, and exhausting. Same external circumstances, radically different experience. The only variable, your internal state. This book is the manual you should have received at birth. It's the operating instructions for understanding why markets move the way they do, why people manipulate each other, why you sometimes feel powerless against your own impulses, and most importantly, how to take the driver's seat and steer your life in the direction you actually want to go. We're going to cover a lot of ground together. We'll explore how your brain's ancient survival wiring gets hijacked in the modern world, leaving you anxious about things that aren't actually life-threatening. We'll look at how professional traders and market makers use the same psychological principles to profit from the unwary. We'll dive into the mechanics of manipulation, both how others do it to you and how you sometimes do it to yourself without even realizing it. And we'll build a practical toolkit for emotional mastery, mental toughness, and genuine prosperity. But here's the most important thing I need you to understand before we begin. Your mindset is a choice, not a personality trait you were born with, not a fixed characteristic like your height or eye color. It's a set of assumptions and mental habits that you can change, starting right now, in this moment. The research is clear on this. People who believe they can grow and change consistently outperform those who believe their abilities are set in stone. This isn't feel-good philosophy. It's neuroscience. It's psychology. And it's the foundation everything else will build upon. So take a deep breath, get comfortable, and prepare to finally receive the operating manual for the most important piece of equipment you own. Chapter 1. The Battlefield Inside Your Head. What we'll learn. Your brain is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you alive. This ancient survival mechanism creates a built-in bias toward negativity that affects every decision you make. Understanding this wiring is the first step toward working with it rather than against it. Why this matters. If you don't understand why your mind defaults to fear, worry, and worst-case scenarios, you'll spend your life fighting yourself. Once you understand the hardware you're working with, you can stop blaming yourself and start making strategic adjustments. The lion in the grass and why it's still running your life. Imagine you're walking through tall grass on the savannah. It's hot, the sun is beating down, and somewhere in that grass there might be a lion. Now, from a survival standpoint, which mistake would you rather make? Mistake number 1. You think there's a lion when there isn't one. You get a spike of fear, you run away, you feel foolish, and you live to see another day. Mistake number 2. You think there's no lion when there actually is one. You become lunch. Your brain evolved to prefer mistake number 1 every single time. It's better to be wrong and alive than right and dead. This is why your mind has what psychologists call a negativity bias. It constantly scans for threats, magnifies dangers, and assumes the worst. In the modern world, this means a critical comment from your boss feels like a survival threat. A rejection on a dating app triggers the same fight or flight response that a predator would. Your brain can't tell the difference between a social danger and a physical one. It just knows something feels threatening. and it launches the full emergency response system. Now here's where this gets really interesting. This bias shows up everywhere once you start looking for it. A person who receives 10 compliments and 1 criticism will fixate on that 1 criticism. A trader watching the markets will feel the sting of a loss twice as intensely as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. A couple will need 5 positive interactions to balance out 1 negative one if they want to stay happily married. This isn't character flaw, it's hardware. It's the operating system you inherited from ancestors who survived precisely because they were jumpy and cautious. But here's the problem. In today's world, most of the lions are imaginary. Your brain is still running ancient threat detection software in an environment where the actual dangers are more like my retirement account might not grow fast enough than something with sharp teeth is about to eat me. Yet the physiological response is the same. Cortisol floods your system. Your thinking narrows. You become defensive and reactive, and you make decisions based on fear rather than clarity. Your brain's job description. Spoiler, it's not your happiness. If you had to write a job description for your brain, what would you put at the top? Most people would say something about thinking clearly, making good decisions, maybe being creative or happy. But your brain would write a very different job description. At the very top, in bold letters, it would say, keep this organism alive. Everything else, happiness, fulfillment, inner peace, is secondary. Nice to have, not essential for survival. This explains something that frustrates a lot of people. Why happiness feels like something you have to actively work at, while anxiety and worry seem to come for free. You don't have to practice being anxious. Your brain serves that up automatically as part of its protective function. But you do have to practice gratitude, presence, and joy. Those states require conscious effort because they're not part of the default survival programming. Here's a vivid example of how this plays out. There's a chemical in your brain called dopamine that plays a huge role in motivation and reward. Dopamine gets released when you anticipate something good: food, sex, social approval, a win in the markets. This system evolved to keep you seeking things that would help you survive and reproduce. But in the modern world, this same system can be hijacked by things that have nothing to do with survival. Social media notifications give you little dopamine hits. Gambling, video games, the endless scroll of news and entertainment. Your brain treats these the same way it would treat finding a berry bush or spotting a potential mate. The system doesn't know the difference. There was a fascinating study at Tulane University where researchers allowed participants to self-stimulate their brain's pleasure centers. The participants did this an average of 40 times per minute. They chose the stimulation over food, even when hungry. One extreme case involved a young man in Korea who played a video game for 58 hours straight with almost no food or water. He died of exhaustion and dehydration. His brain's reward system, designed to keep him alive, ended up killing him because it couldn't distinguish between real survival needs and artificial stimulation. This is the double-edged sword of your brain's design. The very mechanisms that kept your ancestors alive can now work against you. The key insight here isn't that your brain is broken, it's that your brain needs a manager. It needs conscious oversight. It needs you to understand its default settings so you can override them when necessary. The happiness set point, and why winning the lottery won't fix you. There's a study from 1978 that I find absolutely fascinating. Researchers looked at 2 groups of people, lottery winners and people who had become paraplegics. They wanted to know how these dramatically different life events affected happiness. The results? 1 year after their respective events, both groups were approximately as happy as they had been before. Let that sink in. Winning millions of dollars didn't create lasting happiness. Losing the use of your legs didn't create lasting misery. The human mind adapts. This phenomenon is called hedonic adaptation, and it's one of the most important concepts in understanding your own psychology. Whatever happens to you, good or bad, you will eventually return to your baseline level of happiness. The new car becomes just your car. The promotion becomes just your job. The relationship becomes just your relationship. The initial excitement fades, and you start looking for the next thing that will make you happy. Now, This might sound depressing, but it's actually liberating once you understand its implications. If external circumstances don't determine your long-term happiness, then the pursuit of external circumstances as a happiness strategy is fundamentally flawed. You could spend your entire life chasing the next achievement, the next purchase, the next relationship milestone, and end up exactly as happy as you started, just more exhausted. Research by Sonja Lyubomirsky, author of The How of Happiness, breaks down the sources of happiness into 3 categories. About 50% is determined by genetics, your biological set point. Only 10% comes from external circumstances, like whether you're rich or poor, married or single, healthy or sick. The remaining 40%, that comes from your intentional activities, how you think, what you focus on, the habits you cultivate. This 40% is where all the leverage is. This is where mindset work actually matters. The ego, the story you tell yourself about yourself. Now let's talk about something that shapes your emotions even more than your survival wiring, your ego. I'm not using ego in the casual sense of someone being arrogant or full of themselves. I mean it in the deeper psychological sense. The constructed identity, the story you've built about who you are and how the world should treat you. Your ego was created through your thoughts. It's a mind-made identity with no concrete reality of its own, yet it drives an enormous amount of your behavior. You identify with your name, your age, your job title, your political beliefs, your relationship status, your nationality, your personal history. And here's the critical point. Whenever something threatens this constructed identity, you have an emotional reaction. Someone criticizes your political views and you feel personally attacked. Your partner questions a decision you made and you become defensive. Your boss gives feedback on your work and you spiral into self-doubt. The ego operates very similarly to your survival brain. It has one primary concern, its own persistence. It wants to continue existing as the identity it has constructed. And it does this through attachment, attaching itself to things, to people, to beliefs, to roles. The ego says, I am my job, or I am my relationship, or I am my accomplishments. And when any of those things are threatened, the ego experiences it as a survival threat. This is why people become so intensely identified with things that from the outside seem trivial. Sports fans who feel genuine rage when their team loses. People who will defend a political position even when presented with contradictory evidence. The ego can't afford to be wrong because being wrong threatens its existence. The ego would rather be right and miserable than wrong and free. Here's a list of things your ego typically attaches to. Your body, your name, your gender, your nationality, your culture, your family, your beliefs, religious, political, metaphysical, your personal story, your interpretation of your past, your expectations about the future, your problems, illnesses, financial situation, victim identity, your age, your job, your social status, your role, parent, employee, student, material items, house, car, clothes, phone, and your desires. Notice something about this list. Every single item is something that could change, be taken away or be challenged, and every single one has been the cause of enormous human suffering throughout history. Wars have been fought over threatened identities, relationships have been destroyed, fortunes have been lost, all because someone's story about who they are got challenged. The ego also has some predictable characteristics that are worth noting. First, it tends to equate having with being. If I have a fancy car, I am successful. If I have the right partner, I am lovable. Second, it lives through comparison. The ego is constantly measuring itself against other egos, which is why social media, a platform perfectly designed for social comparison, can be so psychologically destructive. Third, the ego is never satisfied. It always wants more. More recognition, more stuff, more validation. Fourth, the ego's sense of self-worth usually depends on how it believes others perceive it. This makes you dependent on external approval for something that should come from within. The trickiness of emotions and why you keep getting fooled. Here's something crucial to understand. Emotions come and go. They are temporary visitors, not permanent residents. One moment you feel on top of the world. A few hours later, you feel anxious and uncertain. The external circumstances haven't changed. Your bank account is the same. Your relationships are the same. Your job is the same. The only thing that shifted was your internal weather. But here's the trap. When you're in the grip of a strong emotion, it doesn't feel temporary. It feels like the permanent truth about your life. When you're depressed, it seems like you've always been depressed and always will be. When you're anxious, the fears feel absolutely real and justified. When you're angry, the person you're angry at seems objectively terrible. The emotion colors your entire perception of reality, and then you mistake that colored perception for objective truth. This is what Eckhart Tolle describes so powerfully when he talks about emotions being amplified, energized thought patterns. The emotion takes over. It wants to consume your attention completely, and usually it succeeds. You get caught in a loop where negative thoughts generate negative emotions, and those negative emotions generate more negative thoughts, and around you go, sinking deeper into a state that feels inescapable. The practical consequence of this is that when you're in a negative emotional state, you have less access to positive thoughts and memories. If someone tells you to just cheer up when you're grieving, or think positive when you're depressed, it doesn't work. It can't work, because your emotional state determines which thoughts are accessible to you. When you're at the bottom of the emotional ladder, thoughts of gratitude and joy simply aren't available in the same way they would be if you were feeling better. This is why strategies that work when you're feeling okay completely fail when you're in a dark place. You can't think your way out of depression with the same mind that created the depression. You need a different approach entirely, which we'll get to later when we discuss practical tools for emotional regulation, the connection between body and mind. One of the most important discoveries in modern psychology is that your mind and body are not separate. They form a single integrated system, and changes in one inevitably affect the other. This means you can change your emotional state by changing your physical state. There's a famous experiment by social psychologist Amy Cuddy that demonstrates this beautifully. Participants who adopted a power pose, standing tall, chest expanded, arms open for just 2 minutes, showed significant hormonal changes. Their testosterone increased by 20%. Their cortisol, the stress hormone, decreased by 10%, and they became more willing to take risks. Conversely, participants who adopted a low-power pose, hunched over, arms crossed, making themselves small, showed the opposite pattern. Decreased testosterone, increased cortisol, and reduced risk tolerance. This is the science behind fake it until you make it. By changing your body posture, you're not just performing for others, you're actually signaling to your own nervous system that you're confident and powerful, and your biology responds accordingly. The mind follows the body's lead. Even more dramatically, a researcher named David K. Reynolds once conducted an experiment on himself to understand depression. He created an alter ego and intentionally adopted all the physical markers of depression, sitting slouched in a chair, shoulders hunched, head hanging down. He repeated depressive statements to himself. There's nothing anybody can do. No one can help. It's hopeless. I'm helpless. I give up. He shook his head, sighed, and in general acted depressed. And the genuine feeling of depression followed. Psychological tests confirmed it. He had created clinical depression through nothing more than body posture and self-talk. The good news, of course, is that this works in both directions. When Reynolds wanted to bring himself back, he had to force himself to become physically active despite not wanting to. As his physical activity increased, his mood improved. He recovered completely. Exercise has been shown in multiple studies to be as effective as antidepressant medication for mild to moderate depression. In one study by James Blumenthal at Duke University, patients with major depressive disorder were assigned to different groups: supervised exercise, home-based exercise, antidepressant therapy, or placebo. After 4 months, the exercise and antidepressant groups had the highest rates of remission, essentially the same. A year later, those who were still exercising regularly had lower depression scores than those who only exercised sporadically. Exercise not only treats depression, it prevents relapse. You don't need to run marathons to get these benefits. Walking for 30 minutes, 5 days a week can work wonders. Research published in PLOS Medicine found that 2.5 hours of moderate exercise per week could add 3.25 years to your lifespan. And the mood benefits kick in almost immediately, within about 5 minutes of starting moderate exercise. The sleep connection. Let's talk about sleep, because it's one of the most underestimated factors in emotional regulation. Sleep deprivation does more than just make you tired. It fundamentally alters your emotional processing. When you haven't slept enough, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, becomes more reactive. You're more likely to interpret neutral faces as threatening. You're more reactive to negative stimuli. And perhaps most interestingly, sleep-deprived people actually have difficulty experiencing positive emotions. They don't get the same boost from positive experiences that well-rested people do. A survey of people suffering from anxiety or depression found that most respondents reported getting less than 6 hours of sleep per night. And a major 2016 study estimated that people sleeping less than 6 hours a night had a 13% higher mortality risk than those sleeping between 7 and 9 hours. The economic cost to the United States alone was estimated at over $400 billion per year. The relationship between sleep and emotions is bidirectional. Poor sleep makes you more emotionally reactive, and emotional distress makes it harder to sleep. Breaking this cycle requires deliberate effort. Some practical strategies. Make your bedroom as dark as possible. Even small amounts of light can disrupt melatonin production. Avoid electronic devices before bed. The blue light they emit suppresses melatonin by up to 50%. And develop a wind-down routine that signals to your nervous system that it's time to shift from alertness to rest. Breathing, the fastest path to state change. You can survive weeks without food, days without water, but only minutes without oxygen. Yet most people don't know how to breathe properly. They take shallow breaths that keep their nervous system in a constant state of low-grade arousal, never fully activating the relaxation response. Slow breathing has measurable effects on your nervous system. At 8 breathing cycles per minute, you experience relief from stress and increased awareness. At 4 cycles per minute, you get intense feelings of awareness, increased visual clarity, and heightened bodily sensitivity. At 1 cycle per minute, you achieve optimized cooperation between your brain hemispheres and dramatic calming of anxiety, fear, and worry. This is not mystical or esoteric. It's physiology. Your breathing rate directly influences your heart rate variability, which in turn affects your emotional state. By consciously controlling your breath, you're accessing a back door into your autonomic nervous system, the part that usually runs on autopilot. Your environment's hidden influence. Your surroundings affect your emotions more than you probably realize. The people you spend time with, the media you consume, the physical space you inhabit, all of these shape your internal state. Negative people will drag you down. A cluttered, disorganized environment will subtly drain your motivation. The constant stream of alarming news will keep your threat detection system activated. Here's a simple but powerful example. When I feel demotivated, I've noticed that decluttering my desk, cleaning my room, or organizing files on my computer almost always gives me a boost of motivation. The external order creates internal order. The physical act of putting things in their proper place seems to signal to the mind that things are under control. And then there's music, one of the most direct routes to emotional change available to you. Studies have shown that listening to positive music for just 12 minutes, 5 times over at a week period, can significantly boost mood. The genre doesn't seem to matter. What matters is whether the music makes you feel the way you want to feel. Classical, rock, electronic, the effect is the same. Music reliably changes emotional states. Some elite performers use music strategically. The world-class endurance athlete Christopher Bergland uses specific playlists to create an invincible state of mind during his training and races. He describes it as creating a parallel universe that had little to do with reality. You can do the same thing in your daily life. Build playlists for different emotional needs. One for motivation, one for relaxation, one for focus. Key takeaway: your brain is not designed for your happiness, it's designed for your survival. Understanding this fundamental truth allows you to stop fighting yourself and start working strategically with your own psychology. The mind and body are one integrated system, and by changing one, you change the other. Reflection prompt. Think about a time when you were in a negative emotional state. Looking back, can you identify how your body posture, breathing, or environment might have been contributing to that state? What might you do differently next time? Chapter 2. The Mechanics of Emotion. What we'll learn: how emotions are actually formed, the three-part formula of interpretation, identification, and repetition. Once you understand this formula, you can start disassembling negative emotional patterns that have controlled you for years. Why this matters. Most people believe emotions just happen to them. In reality, you play an active role in creating and sustaining your emotional states. This means you also have the power to change them. The three-part formula for creating or destroying emotions. Let me give you a formula that explains how every persistent emotional state is created. Once you understand this formula, you'll start seeing it everywhere, and more importantly, you'll understand exactly what you need to do to interrupt patterns that aren't serving you. Here's the formula. Interpretation plus identification plus repetition equals strong emotion. Simple, right? But let's unpack each piece because the power is in the details. Interpretation is how you make sense of what happens to you. An event occurs, your boss criticizes your work, your partner seems distant, the market drops suddenly, and you immediately assign meaning to that event. The key insight here is that the event itself has no inherent emotional charge. It's neutral. It's just something that happened. The emotional charge comes entirely from the interpretation you layer on top of it. This explains why two people can experience the exact same event and have completely different emotional reactions. Rain on your wedding day could be seen as a disaster that ruined everything, or as a blessing that will make for great stories later. A market crash can be seen as a catastrophe or as a buying opportunity. The event is the same. The interpretation creates the emotion. Your interpretations aren't random. They're based on the deep assumptions you hold about how the world works and how things should be. Most of these assumptions were never consciously chosen. They were absorbed from your family, your culture, your past experiences. And until you bring them into conscious awareness, they'll keep generating emotional reactions automatically. Identification is the second piece. Once you've interpreted an event in a certain way, you then identify with that interpretation. You don't just think that was a mistake, you think I'm a failure. You don't just notice feeling sad, you become identified with sadness, saying I am sad rather than I'm experiencing sadness right now. This distinction might seem subtle, but it's everything. When you say I am sad, you're making sadness part of your identity. When you say I'm experiencing feelings of sadness, you're acknowledging the emotion as a temporary visitor. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness that notices the emotions. Think of it this way. You are the sky. Your emotions are the weather. The sky doesn't become the storm. The storm passes through the sky. The sky remains. You remain, regardless of what emotional weather is moving through you at any given moment. Repetition is the third and final piece. A single interpretation identified with once doesn't create a deep emotional pattern. It's the repetition that does it. Every time you replay the argument in your mind, you're strengthening the neural pathways associated with that anger. Every time you revisit the mistake you made at work, you're deepening the groove of shame. Every time you imagine worst case scenarios about your finances, you're reinforcing the anxiety pattern. This is actually good news because it means the process works in both directions. Just as repetition can strengthen negative patterns, it can also strengthen positive ones. This is the basis for all practices of mental conditioning, which we'll explore in detail later. The magnetic power of emotions. Here's something crucial to understand about how emotions work. Your emotional state acts like a magnet, attracting thoughts that match its frequency. When you're in a negative state, you'll automatically attract and latch onto negative thoughts. When you're feeling positive, you'll naturally think positive thoughts. Eckhart Tolle describes this as a vicious circle between thinking and emotion. The thought pattern creates a magnified reflection of itself as an emotion, and the vibrational frequency of the emotion keeps feeding the original thought pattern. They feed each other in a loop. I experienced this myself in a very concrete way. I have some knee problems that prevent me from playing certain sports. Usually my knees don't bother me, but when they do flare up, I notice something interesting. The physical pain would trigger negative emotions, which would then cause me to focus on everything else that was wrong in my life. Work frustrations, relationship issues, financial concerns, all of it would come flooding in. A minor physical discomfort would cascade into hours or even days of emotional distress, all because of this magnetic effect. The lesson here is that you must learn to compartmentalize. When something negative happens, don't let it become a magnet for every other negative thing in your life. Address the specific issue without letting it contaminate everything else. The problems exist only in your mind. Taken separately, most of them aren't that big a deal. But clustered together through the magnetic power of negative emotion, they can feel overwhelming. The problem with problems, and why they don't actually exist. Let me share something that might sound a bit radical at first. Problems don't exist in objective reality. Problems exist only in your mind and only in time. They are created by thought, and thought always operates in the past or the future, never in the present moment. Think about this. What you don't focus on doesn't exist from your mind's perspective. If you're not thinking about something, it's simply not part of your experience. A problem can only be a problem when you label it as such. The situation itself is neutral. Your interpretation turns it into a problem. A problem also requires time to exist. It's always about something that happened in the past that you wish hadn't happened, or something in the future that you're afraid will happen. In this present moment, right now, is there actually a problem? Or is there just what's happening, without the story you're telling yourself about it? This isn't just philosophy, it has practical implications. Mental suffering comes from the stories you tell yourself about what's happening, not from the events themselves. Dale Carnegie, in his classic book How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, quotes a distinguished psychiatrist who said that 100% of the fatigue of sedentary workers in good health is due to psychological factors. Emotional factors, not physical ones. We exhaust ourselves with mental suffering. We replay conversations that are already over. We worry about futures that may never arrive. We hold on to resentments that happened years ago. All of this mental activity creates real physiological stress without solving anything. The energy you spend worrying about a task is often more exhausting than the task itself. Procrastination isn't tiring because of what you eventually do. It's tiring because of the mental anguish you put yourself through before you finally act. The emotional ladder. There's a concept from Esther and Jerry Hicks that I find very useful for understanding how to move from negative to positive emotional states. They describe emotions as existing on a ladder, with the most contracted, painful states at the bottom and the most expansive, liberated states at the top. At the very bottom, you have feelings like depression, hopelessness, powerlessness. Just above that comes anger. Now, anger doesn't sound like a positive emotion, but notice that when you're angry, you have more energy than when you're depressed. Anger can actually be a step up the ladder because it indicates movement. It means you're no longer completely collapsed into hopelessness. Above anger, you might have frustration, then overwhelm, then disappointment. As you continue up, you reach emotions like contentment, hopefulness, optimism, enthusiasm, and eventually joy and appreciation at the top. The practical value of this model is that you can't usually jump from the bottom of the ladder to the top. You can't go directly from depression to joy, but you can reach for a slightly better feeling thought. You can move from depression to anger, from anger to frustration, from frustration to hope. Each step up the ladder gives you access to slightly better feeling thoughts, which in turn open the door to even better feeling thoughts. I've experienced this myself. After being depressed for a while, I felt anger rising. I got tired of the stories and excuses running through my mind. I used that anger as fuel to complete tasks I'd been avoiding. The anger was more energized than the depression. It was progress. It was movement up the ladder. Key takeaway. Emotions are not things that happen to you. They are experiences you actively participate in creating through interpretation, identification, and repetition. Understanding this formula gives you the power to disassemble patterns that have controlled you for years. Reflection prompt. Think about an emotional pattern that recurs in your life. Can you identify the interpretation that triggers it? The way you identify with that interpretation. How often you repeat the pattern. What might happen if you changed just one of these elements? Chapter 3. The games people play and how to stop being a pawn. What we'll learn. The specific tactics manipulators use to control others, and more importantly, the personality traits that make someone vulnerable to manipulation. Knowledge is protection. Why this matters. Manipulation is everywhere, in relationships, in the workplace, in the media, in the markets. Understanding how it works is the first step to becoming immune to it. The manipulator's toolkit. Let's talk about manipulation. Not the clumsy, obvious kind that you'd spot immediately, but the subtle, covert kind that works on you without your conscious awareness. The kind that makes you question your own perceptions, your own memories, your own sanity. Manipulation exists on a spectrum. On one end, you have benign social influence, persuading a friend to try a restaurant you like, encouraging a colleague to support your project. On the other end, you have the systematic destruction of another person's autonomy and self-trust. The techniques are often the same. It's the intent and the degree that differ. Gaslighting is perhaps the most insidious form of manipulation because it attacks your very sense of reality. The term comes from a 1938 play, later made into a film, in which a husband slowly convinces his wife that she's going insane by making small changes in their environment and then denying those changes ever happened. The gaslighter tells you that what you saw, heard, or felt didn't actually happen. That never happened. You're imagining things. You're being too sensitive. You're overreacting. Over time, this erodes your trust in your own perceptions. You start depending on the manipulator to tell you what's real. You lose confidence in your own judgment. This is especially powerful when the gaslighter is someone you trust, a partner, a parent, a boss. The combination of trust and systematic reality, denial, is psychologically devastating. Love flooding is another powerful technique. The manipulator showers you with attention, affection, compliments, and gifts. You feel special, adored, seen. This creates a powerful bond and a sense of obligation. Then, once you're hooked, the manipulator withdraws that affection. You're now in a state of emotional deprivation, desperate to regain the love and attention you've come to depend on. You'll do almost anything to get back in their good graces. This pattern of intermittent reinforcement, unpredictable rewards mixed with withdrawal, is one of the most addictive psychological dynamics known. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling so compelling. Guilt as a weapon is particularly effective against compassionate people. The manipulator uses your empathy against you. They play the victim. They make you feel responsible for their emotional state. If you assert a boundary, they act hurt. If you express a need, they make you feel selfish. Over time, you learn to suppress your own needs to avoid triggering their guilt, inducing responses. The personality types most likely to manipulate. While anyone can use manipulative tactics occasionally, certain personality types use them as their primary mode of relating to others. Understanding these types helps you spot them before they do damage. Narcissists have an inflated sense of self-importance and a deep need for admiration. They genuinely believe they're special, superior, and entitled to special treatment. This isn't just confidence, it's a fundamental distortion of reality. Narcissists see other people not as separate individuals with their own needs and feelings, but as extensions of themselves, tools to be used for validation and service. When you're useful to a narcissist, they can be charming and attentive. When you're not, or when you challenge their self-image, they can become cruel and dismissive. Machiavellians are strategic manipulators. The term comes from Niccolò Machiavelli, the Renaissance political philosopher who advised rulers on how to acquire and maintain power through cunning and ruthlessness. Machiavellians view social interactions as strategic games. They're constantly calculating, how can this person be useful to me? What do they want? And how can I use that to get what I want? They're skilled at impression management, presenting a carefully crafted image while concealing their true intentions. Psychopaths add a chilling dimension to manipulation, a complete absence of empathy. They simply don't feel what others feel. This isn't a choice, it's a fundamental feature of their psychology. They can be charming and engaging because they've learned to mimic the emotional expressions that create connection, but there's nothing behind the performance. Psychopaths don't experience remorse, guilt, or genuine attachment. When they use people, they feel nothing about the harm they cause. It's just instrumental behavior, means to an end. Sadists are perhaps the most disturbing because their manipulation isn't primarily instrumental. They genuinely enjoy causing suffering. They manipulate not just to get something, but for the pleasure of watching others struggle, fail, or hurt. This personality type is less common than the others, but when present, it's particularly dangerous. These 4 types, sometimes called the dark tetrad, share common features: a lack of empathy, a willingness to exploit others, and a view of relationships as transactional rather than genuinely connective. The key to protecting yourself is recognizing the signs early, before you're emotionally invested enough to make objective judgment difficult. The vulnerable. Who gets targeted? Manipulators don't target everyone equally. They're selective. They look for people who have specific vulnerabilities that make them easier to control. Understanding these vulnerabilities helps you shore up your defenses. People with low self-esteem are prime targets. If you don't believe in your own worth, you'll be grateful for any attention, even manipulative attention. You'll tolerate treatment that a person with healthy self-esteem would immediately reject. You'll be reluctant to assert boundaries because you don't feel entitled to have them. People with poor boundaries are also vulnerable. If you were raised in an environment where your boundaries weren't respected, where your privacy was invaded, your feelings dismissed, your autonomy undermined, you may have never learned that boundaries are normal and healthy. Manipulators quickly identify this and exploit it. The desire to please others, while generally a positive trait, can become a vulnerability when it's excessive. People pleasers have an almost compulsive need for approval and harmony. They'll sacrifice their own needs to avoid conflict or disappointment. Manipulators love this because it means you'll comply even when compliance harms you. Finally, people in transition or crisis are especially vulnerable. After a divorce, a job loss, a bereavement, your normal support systems are disrupted and your sense of identity may be shaken. Manipulators often appear during these vulnerable periods, offering the support and validation you desperately need, positioning themselves as your savior, while actually positioning themselves to exploit you. The professional manipulators, market makers, and trading syndicates. Now let's look at manipulation in a completely different context, the financial markets. Here, manipulation isn't interpersonal, it's systemic, and understanding how it works can teach you volumes about manipulation in other domains. Market makers and specialists are professional intermediaries who facilitate trading. They're required to create a market, to be willing to buy when you want to sell and sell when you want to buy. This gives them an extraordinary informational advantage. They can see the flow of orders on both sides of the market. They know where the stop-loss orders are clustered. They know when large institutional traders are accumulating or distributing positions. This information asymmetry is the foundation of market manipulation. The market maker can see that there's a concentration of buy-stop orders just above the current price level. Those stops represent guaranteed buying pressure. If the price reaches that level, all those stops will trigger, creating a surge of buying that will push the price even higher. So the market maker, trading for their own account, might push the price up to trigger those stops, selling into the resulting buying frenzy at an advantageous price. This is not illegal. It's not even particularly hidden from those who know what to look for. But most traders don't know what to look for. They see the price moving up and think it represents genuine buying interest. They don't realize they're being herded into positions that will soon be reversed. The same dynamic plays out on the downside. Below the market, there are concentrations of sell-stop orders. If the market maker can push the price down to trigger those stops, they create a cascade of selling that they can buy into at favorable prices. This is called running the stops, and it's a routine part of professional trading. The lesson here extends beyond trading. Any system with asymmetric information creates opportunities for those with the information advantage to manipulate those without it. Whether it's used car sales, real estate negotiations, or corporate politics, the person who knows more about the true state of affairs has an edge. Your protection is to understand that this dynamic exists and to approach situations with appropriate skepticism. Covert emotional manipulation in daily life. Manipulation doesn't require a clinical personality disorder or a trading desk. Ordinary people use manipulative tactics all the time, often without full awareness of what they're doing. Recognizing these tactics in yourself and others is essential for healthy relationships. Negative reinforcement is a subtle but powerful technique. The manipulator does something you don't like and keeps doing it until you comply with their wishes to make the unpleasant behavior stop. A partner who gives you the silent treatment until you apologize, even when you weren't in the wrong, is using negative reinforcement. A colleague who makes passive, aggressive comments until you agree to take on their share of the work is doing the same. Premature disclosure creates false intimacy. Someone you barely know shares deeply personal information, making you feel special and trusted. This false sense of intimacy then makes you more likely to reciprocate with personal information of your own, information that can later be used against you. Or it creates a sense of obligation that makes you more willing to do favors for them. Rationalization is the manipulator's excuse, making. Whatever they did, there was a good reason for it. The affair happened because they were feeling neglected. The broken promise was due to circumstances beyond their control. The cruel comment was just a joke, and you're being too sensitive. The rationalization always positions the manipulator as the real victim, or minimizes their responsibility. Mind control and brainwashing. At the extreme end of the manipulation spectrum, we find systematic mind control and brainwashing. These techniques were studied extensively after the Korean War, when American prisoners of war appeared to have been converted to communist ideology. What researchers discovered was not some mystical power, but a systematic process that anyone could learn. The process typically begins with isolation. The target is separated from their normal support systems, family, friends, familiar environments. This creates dependency. When the only human contact you have is with your captors or cult leaders, you become motivated to please them and adopt their worldview. Next comes the attack on identity. The target is made to feel that everything they believed about themselves is wrong. Their values are criticized. Their past is reinterpreted. Their sense of self is systematically dismantled. This creates a state of psychological confusion that makes the target receptive to new beliefs. Then comes the rebuilding. New beliefs are introduced gradually, starting with ideas that are easy to accept and moving toward more extreme positions. This is sometimes called milk before meat. The easy, palatable ideas come first to create acceptance, and the harder ideas follow once the target is committed. Throughout this process, intermittent rewards and punishments keep the target off balance. Praise and affection are mixed with criticism and withdrawal. The target never knows which version of the manipulator they'll encounter, creating a state of hypervigilance and dependency. The techniques used in extreme mind control are essentially the same as those used in milder manipulation, just applied more systematically and intensely. Love flooding, isolation, identity attacks, intermittent reinforcement. These are present in abusive relationships and high-control groups of all kinds. Protecting yourself. The first and most important defense against manipulation is awareness. Simply knowing these techniques exist makes you less susceptible to them. When someone is love flooding you, you can recognize the pattern and maintain appropriate skepticism. When someone is gaslighting you, you can trust your own perceptions instead of doubting them. The second defense is strong boundaries. Know what you will and won't accept, and be willing to enforce those boundaries even when it's uncomfortable. Manipulators test boundaries constantly. If you let a boundary slide once, they'll keep pushing. But if you hold the line firmly and consistently, they'll usually move on to easier targets. The third defense is a strong support network. Manipulators thrive on isolation. The more connected you are to people who genuinely care about you, the harder it is for a manipulator to distort your reality. Your friends and family can serve as reality checks, helping you see when someone's behavior toward you isn't normal or acceptable. The fourth defense is trusting your own feelings. If something feels wrong in a relationship, if you constantly feel confused, guilty, inadequate, or controlled, pay attention to that feeling. Your intuition is picking up on patterns that your conscious mind may be rationalizing away. Don't talk yourself out of your own discomfort. Key takeaway: manipulation works by exploiting predictable psychological vulnerabilities. Understanding both the techniques and your own vulnerabilities is the foundation of immunity. Reflection prompt: think about a relationship in your life that feels consistently draining or confusing. Are any of the manipulative techniques described here present? If so, what boundary might you need to set? Chapter 4. The Architecture of Belief. What we'll learn: how your core beliefs shape every aspect of your experience, from your emotional reactions to your capacity for success, and more importantly, how to identify and change beliefs that are limiting you. Why this matters: your beliefs aren't just opinions, they're the operating instructions for your life. Change the instructions, and you change the output, the story you're living in. Every single one of us lives inside a story. This story includes who we think we are, what we believe we're capable of, how we expect others to treat us, and what we think we deserve. We didn't consciously write this story. It was assembled from childhood experiences, cultural messages, family patterns, and the conclusions we drew from significant events. But even though we didn't consciously write it, we live it out every day as if it were the absolute truth. The problem is that most of these stories are not particularly accurate, and many of them are actively harmful. A child who was frequently criticized might grow into an adult whose story includes, "I'm not good enough." A child whose emotional needs weren't met might develop the story, "I'm not lovable," or "I have to earn love by being perfect." A child who experienced instability might live by the story, "the world is not safe," or "I can't trust anyone." These stories, once established, act as filters. They filter what you notice, how you interpret events, and what you believe is possible for you. If your story says you're not good enough, you'll interpret a lukewarm performance review as confirmation, while dismissing genuine praise as people just being nice. If your story says you can't trust anyone, you'll find evidence of untrustworthiness everywhere, while ignoring examples of loyalty and honesty. This is why two people can have such different experiences in similar circumstances. The circumstances aren't creating the experience, the story is. Change the story, and the experience changes, even if the circumstances remain exactly the same. The fixed versus growth mindset. One of the most important discoveries in modern psychology comes from the work of Carol Dweck at Stanford University. She identified two fundamentally different mindsets that people hold about their own abilities: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. With a fixed mindset, you believe that your intelligence, talents, and capabilities are essentially fixed traits. You're born with a certain amount, and that's what you've got to work with. Success, from this perspective, is about proving that you have enough of these traits. Failure is threatening because it suggests you might not actually be as smart, talented, or capable as you and others believed. With a growth mindset, you believe that your abilities can be developed through effort, learning, and persistence. Your current level is just a starting point. Success is about improvement and mastery, not about proving innate superiority. Failure is not a verdict on your worth. It's feedback that helps you improve. These different mindsets lead to dramatically different behaviors. People with fixed mindsets tend to avoid challenges because challenges risk exposing their limitations. They give up more easily when faced with obstacles. They see effort as a sign of inadequacy. If you have to work hard at something, it must mean you're not naturally good at it. They ignore useful criticism and feel threatened by the success of others. People with growth mindsets embrace challenges because challenges are opportunities to learn. They persist through obstacles because they understand that mastery takes time. They see effort as the path to mastery. They learn from criticism and find inspiration in the success of others. The implications extend far beyond academics. In relationships, a fixed mindset says we're either compatible or we're not. If we have to work at this, something is wrong. A growth mindset says relationships require effort and communication. Conflicts are opportunities to deepen understanding. In business, a fixed mindset says some people are natural leaders and some aren't. A growth mindset says leadership skills can be developed. Perhaps most importantly, these mindsets can be changed. Just learning about the growth mindset, understanding that your brain is like a muscle that gets stronger with use, can begin to shift your perspective. The awareness itself is transformative, the not good enough story. One of the most pervasive and damaging stories that people carry is the belief that they're not good enough. It shows up everywhere. In relationships, it manifests as jealousy, clinginess, or the persistent fear of abandonment. In work, it shows up as perfectionism, imposter syndrome, or the inability to accept compliments. In personal growth, it appears as self-sabotage or the tendency to give up just before succeeding. Here's the thing about the not good enough story. It's almost never based on objective reality. It's based on internalized criticism, unrealistic standards, and the natural human tendency to compare our insides to other people's outsides. You know all your own flaws, doubts, and secret struggles, but you only see the curated external presentation of others. Of course, you come up short in that comparison. The not good enough story also has a strange kind of comfort to it. If you already believe you're not good enough, you don't have to risk trying and failing. Failure, when you already expected to fail, doesn't hurt as much. The story protects you from the vulnerability of genuine effort and genuine hope. Letting go of the story means risking real disappointment, which is why people cling to it even when it makes them miserable. Overcoming this story requires several steps. First, have to recognize that it exists. Start noticing when the not good enough voice shows up. What triggers it? What does it say specifically? Second, you need to start questioning the evidence. Is it actually true that you're not good enough? Or is this an old story that you've been repeating so long it feels true? Third, you need to start keeping track of your actual accomplishments, no matter how small. Write them down, review them regularly, build a body of evidence that contradicts the story. There's a powerful exercise I recommend. Start a win log. Every day, write down at least 3 things you did well, no matter how small. I woke up on time. I ate a healthy breakfast. I completed that report I'd been putting off. Over time, this practice retrains your brain to notice evidence of your competence and worth, rather than exclusively focusing on your shortcomings. The scarcity versus abundance mindset. Another fundamental belief that shapes your entire experience is whether you see the world through a lens of scarcity or abundance. This applies to everything: money, love, opportunities, recognition, ideas. A scarcity mindset says there's not enough to go around. If someone else succeeds, it takes away from your possible success. If someone else is praised, it diminishes you. Life becomes a zero-sum competition for limited resources. This creates constant anxiety, comparison, and a kind of desperate grasping that actually repels the very things you're trying to attract. An abundance mindset says there's plenty for everyone. Someone else's success doesn't threaten yours. It actually shows you what's possible and expands your sense of what's available. Praise given to others doesn't diminish you. Life becomes collaborative rather than competitive. This creates openness, generosity, and a relaxed confidence that's genuinely attractive. The scarcity mindset has deep evolutionary roots. For most of human history, resources genuinely were scarce, and survival did depend on getting your share. But in the modern world, this doesn't apply to the things that most determine quality of life. There's not a finite amount of love, recognition, creative ideas, or business opportunities. In fact, these things tend to expand the more they're shared. Shifting from scarcity to abundance requires conscious practice. Start by noticing when scarcity thinking shows up. Do you feel a pang of envy when a colleague succeeds? Do you get protective of your ideas, afraid someone will steal them? Do you assume that if someone has something you want, there's less available for you? These are all signals that scarcity thinking is operating. Then, deliberately challenge these thoughts. What if your colleague's success actually benefits you by raising the profile of your whole team? What if sharing your ideas leads to collaborations that make them better? What if the success of others is proof that success is possible, rather than evidence that it's being taken from you? Changing your story. The beliefs and stories that run your life are not fixed. They were learned, and they can be unlearned. But this doesn't happen automatically or overnight. It requires deliberate, consistent practice. Here's a framework for doing this work. First, identify the story you want to change. Get specific. "I'm not good enough" is too vague. What specifically do you believe you're not good enough at? Where did this belief come from? What experiences seem to confirm it, and what experiences contradict it? Second, create a new story that's more aligned with reality and with the person you want to become. This story should be specific, positive, and stated in the present tense. "I am learning and growing every day. My past does not define my future. I am capable of achieving my goals." Third, practice the new story consistently. This is where affirmations and mantras become useful. Repeat your new story to yourself daily. Write it down, post it where you'll see it. The repetition creates new neural pathways. Over time, the new story begins to feel natural in the way the old story once did. Fourth, gather evidence for the new story. Every time something happens that supports your new belief, notice it, write it down, celebrate it. The more evidence you accumulate, the stronger the new belief becomes. Fifth, be patient with yourself. These patterns took years to establish. They won't change overnight. Expect setbacks. When you catch yourself slipping back into the old story, don't beat yourself up. Just notice it and gently redirect to the new story. This is a practice, not a one-time fix. Key takeaway: your beliefs are not permanent truths. They're learned patterns that can be unlearned. By identifying limiting stories and deliberately replacing them with more empowering ones, you can fundamentally change your experience of life. Reflection prompt: what is one story you tell yourself about who you are or what you're capable of? Is this story based on objective truth, or is it a conclusion you drew from past experiences that may no longer apply? Chapter 5: The Practical Toolkit for Emotional Mastery. What we'll learn: specific, actionable techniques for managing your emotional state, building mental resilience, and creating the conditions for consistent well-being. Why this matters. Understanding psychology is valuable, but it's only useful if you can apply it. This chapter gives you the tools to do exactly that. The power of self. Talk. The conversation you have with yourself is the most important conversation in your life. It shapes your mood, your confidence, your motivation, and your actions. Yet, most people pay very little attention to how they talk to themselves. They allow negative, critical, defeatist self-talk to run on autopilot, never questioning whether these internal messages are true or helpful. Here's a simple test. Would you talk to a friend the way you talk to yourself? If your friend made a mistake, would you tell them they're stupid, worthless, and always mess things up? Of course not. You'd be supportive, encouraging, and helpful. You'd help them see the mistake in perspective and figure out how to do better next time. So why don't you treat yourself with the same kindness? Negative self-talk often takes the form of absolutes. "I always mess this up. I never get things right. Everything goes wrong for me." These statements are almost never literally true, but they feel true when you're in a negative state, and the more you repeat them, the more they become self-fulfilling prophecies. The first step in changing your self-talk is simply becoming aware of it. For the next few days, pay attention to your internal monologue. When you notice negative self-talk, write it down. At the end of each day, look at what you've written and ask yourself, is this actually true? Would I say this to someone I care about? What would be a more accurate and helpful way to express this? Once you've identified your negative patterns, you can start replacing them with more constructive self-talk. Instead of, "I always mess this up," try, "I made a mistake this time. Here's what I learned, and here's what I'll do differently next time." Instead of, "I'm not good enough," try, "I'm still learning and growing, and I'm better than I was a year ago." This isn't about lying to yourself or engaging in empty positive thinking. It's about being accurate. Your negative self-talk is usually just as distorted as blind optimism, just in the opposite direction. Accurate thinking acknowledges your strengths alongside your areas for growth. Reframing, the art of changing perspective. Reframing is one of the most powerful cognitive tools available to you. It's the practice of looking at the same situation from a different angle, changing the frame through which you view an event. The event doesn't change, but its meaning does. Consider the classic example. rain on your wedding day. One person sees this as a disaster that ruined everything. Another sees it as good luck, a story they'll tell for decades, a moment that made the day more memorable and meaningful. Same rain, different frame. Completely different emotional experience. Reframing isn't denial. You're not pretending the situation is different than it is. You're choosing to focus on aspects of the situation that are more useful to you. You're asking yourself, what's another way to look at this? What can I learn from this? How might this actually serve me in the long run? Every problem can be reframed as a challenge. Every failure can be reframed as a learning opportunity. Every criticism can be reframed as feedback that might help you improve. Every obstacle can be reframed as a test of your resolve that will make you stronger. The key is to make reframing a deliberate practice. When you catch yourself in a negative frame, stop and consciously ask, what's another way to see this? What's the opportunity here? What's the lesson? The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, reframing becomes your default response rather than something you have to force. Mindfulness, the art of being present. Most mental suffering comes from not being present. When you're anxious, you're living in the future, worrying about things that haven't happened and may never happen. When you're regretful or resentful, you're living in the past, replaying events that are already over and cannot be changed. The present moment, where life actually happens, is where peace resides. Mindfulness is simply the practice of bringing your attention to the present moment without judgment. It's noticing what's happening right now. Your breath, your body sensations, the sounds around you, the thoughts moving through your mind, without getting caught up in them or trying to change them. The most basic mindfulness practice is simply paying attention to your breath. When I say paying attention, I don't mean thinking about your breath or analyzing it. I mean simply noticing the physical sensation of breathing, the air moving in and out, the rise and fall of your chest or belly. Your mind will wander. That's what minds do. The practice isn't about stopping thoughts. It's about noticing when your mind has wandered and gently bringing it back to the breath. Each time you do this, you're strengthening your capacity for attention and presence. Mindfulness isn't just a meditation practice. You can bring mindful attention to any activity, walking, eating, listening to someone, working. When you're fully present with what you're doing, anxiety about the future and rumination about the past naturally fall away. There's no room for them when you're completely here. State control, mastering your mood. Your emotional state is not something that just happens to you. It's something you can learn to influence and, over time, control. This doesn't mean you'll never feel sad, angry, or anxious again. It means you won't be at the mercy of these states. You'll have tools to shift them when they're not serving you. One of the most effective state control techniques involves anchoring. Think of a time when you felt completely confident, powerful, and capable. Close your eyes and relive that experience in vivid detail. What did you see? What did you hear? What sensations did you feel in your body? Really immerse yourself in that memory. Now, while you're fully experiencing that state, create a physical anchor. Something you can do to trigger the state again. It could be pressing your thumb and forefinger together, or touching a specific spot on your wrist, or taking a particular kind of breath. The anchor should be something you can do discreetly in any situation. Practice this several times, associating the anchor with the state. Then the next time you're feeling anxious or uncertain, fire the anchor. Your nervous system has been conditioned to associate the anchor with the confident state, and firing it will begin to shift your physiology and your emotions. You can create anchors for any state you want to access. Calm, focus, creativity, compassion. The key is to practice when you're already feeling the state naturally, strengthening the association between the anchor and the feeling. Over time, the anchor becomes a reliable tool for state management. The morning mindset routine. How you start your day sets the tone for everything that follows. An intentional morning routine can dramatically improve your mental and emotional state throughout the day. Here are the key elements of an effective morning mindset routine. First, never hit the snooze button. When your alarm goes off, get up. Hitting snooze trains your brain that your first commitment of the day is negotiable. It also fragments your sleep in a way that leaves you groggier than if you'd just gotten up. If you struggle with this, put your alarm across the room so you have to physically get out of bed to turn it off. Second, hydrate immediately. You've been breathing out moisture all night. Your brain is dehydrated. A glass of water first thing in the morning helps restore optimal functioning. Third, move your body. This doesn't have to be a full workout. A few minutes of stretching, some push-ups, or a short walk can get your blood flowing and shift your physiology. Remember the body-mind connection. Changing your physical state changes your mental state. Fourth, practice gratitude. Before you check your phone, before you look at email, before you engage with the demands of the day, take a moment to think of 3 things you're genuinely grateful for. Feel the gratitude in your body. This practice has been shown in research to increase happiness and resilience. Fifth, set your intention for the day. What kind of person do you want to be today? How do you want to show up? What's the most important thing you want to accomplish? Setting an intention gives your day direction and purpose. Physical foundations. Your mental and emotional state depends on your physical state. You can't build a skyscraper on a swamp. Similarly, you can't build mental resilience on a foundation of poor sleep, terrible nutrition, and no exercise. The body is the foundation. The mind is built on top of it. Sleep we've already discussed, but it bears repeating. Prioritize sleep. 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep is not a luxury, it's a biological necessity. Everything in your life, your mood, your focus, your relationships, your performance, suffers when you're sleep deprived. Nutrition matters enormously. What you eat directly affects your brain chemistry and therefore your emotional state. Blood sugar crashes create irritability and brain fog. Nutrient deficiencies can contribute to depression and anxiety. A diet built around whole foods, vegetables, fruits, quality proteins, healthy fats, provides the biochemical foundation for emotional stability. Exercise is equally important. We've already discussed its antidepressant effects, but it goes beyond mood. Regular exercise improves sleep quality, increases energy, enhances cognitive function, and builds physical confidence. Find something you enjoy enough to do consistently. It doesn't have to be intense. Consistency matters more than intensity. The social dimension. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. This isn't just a saying. It's supported by research on social networks and their influence on everything from weight to happiness to income. The people around you shape your norms, your expectations, and your behavior. Take an honest inventory of your social circle. Are the people around you positive, growth-oriented, and supportive? Or are they negative, complaining, and draining? Do they inspire you to be better, or do they pull you down to their level? Some relationships need to be ended or severely limited. This is hard, especially when the toxic person is a family member or a long-time friend. But your mental health and your future depend on protecting yourself from people who consistently bring negativity and drama into your life. Other relationships can be improved through honest communication. Sometimes people don't realize how their behavior affects you. A difficult conversation, handled with care and respect, can transform a draining relationship into a supportive one. And sometimes the issue is that you need to add more positive people to your life. Seek out people who are doing what you want to do, who think the way you want to think, who inspire and challenge you. These relationships may not come easily, but they're worth the effort to find and cultivate. Continuous learning and growth. The growth mindset isn't just about believing you can improve, it's about actually engaging in the practices that produce improvement. This means committing to lifelong learning and deliberate skill development. Reading is one of the most efficient ways to learn. A book represents years of someone's experience and thinking, condensed into a form you can absorb in hours. Make reading a daily habit. Even 15 minutes a day adds up to about 15 books a year, which over a decade is a substantial education on almost any topic. But reading alone isn't enough. You need to apply what you learn. Knowledge without application is just entertainment. When you read something valuable, ask yourself, how can I use this? What would it look like to apply this in my life? Then actually do it. Experiment. See what works for you. Adjust as needed. Seek out challenging experiences. Growth happens at the edge of your comfort zone, not so far beyond it that you're overwhelmed, but far enough that you're stretched. Each time you do something that scares you a little, your comfort zone expands. Over time, things that once seemed impossible become routine. Embrace feedback, even when it's uncomfortable. Criticism that stings often contains valuable information. Instead of getting defensive, ask yourself, is there truth in this? What can I learn from it? The people who grow fastest are the ones who can hear hard truths without collapsing. Finally, be patient with the process. Growth is not linear. You'll have periods of rapid progress and periods of plateau, even apparent regression. This is normal. The key is to keep showing up, keep doing the work, keep trusting the process. Over time, the trajectory is unmistakably upward. Key takeaway: emotional mastery isn't about eliminating negative emotions. It's about building the skills and practices that allow you to navigate them effectively. The tools are simple but require consistent application. Start small, be consistent, and trust the process. Reflection prompt: which of the practices described in this chapter would make the biggest difference in your life if you implemented it consistently? What's one small step you can take today to begin? Chapter 6: The Hidden Architecture of Markets. What we'll learn: how financial markets actually work, not the theory but the reality of how professional operators create and exploit price movements. This understanding will transform how you see any market, including the market for your own labor and skills. Why this matters. Markets are not the rational, efficient mechanisms that textbooks describe. They are psychological battlegrounds where information advantage translates directly into profit. Understanding this changes everything about how you approach investing, trading, and even your career. The myth of the rational market economics textbooks describe markets as efficient mechanisms where prices reflect all available information and rational actors make optimal decisions. This is elegant, mathematically tractable, and largely wrong. Real markets are driven by fear and greed, by manipulation and herd behavior, by professionals who understand crowd psychology and use it to their advantage. The patterns you see on price charts are not random, but they're not driven by pure fundamentals either. They're driven by the interaction between professional operators who know what they're doing and the uninformed public who provide liquidity and ultimately profits. This doesn't mean markets are completely unpredictable. It means that to understand them, you need to understand the psychology of the participants, especially the professional participants who have the information advantage and the capital to move prices. Supply and demand, the real story. We're told that prices go up when there are more buyers than sellers and down when there are more sellers than buyers. This is technically true, but misleadingly simple. A market goes up not necessarily because there's more buying than selling at that moment, but because there's no substantial selling to stop the up move. The major buying already happened at lower prices during the accumulation phase when professional operators were quietly building positions. By the time the average person notices the uptrend and wants to participate, the professionals are already positioned and waiting to sell. Similarly, a market goes down not because there's necessarily more selling than buying, but because there's no substantial buying to stop the decline. The selling already happened during the distribution phase, when professionals were offloading positions to latecomers who were finally convinced the market would keep going up forever. This is why markets tend to fall much faster than they rise. In a rising market, professionals are buying at lower levels and selling into strength. There's constant resistance in the form of profit taking. In a falling market, there's no professional support. The market is falling through airs, with no one willing to step in and buy until prices reach levels where value becomes compelling again. The campaign: how professionals operate. Professional operators don't trade randomly. They run campaigns, coordinated efforts to accumulate or distribute large positions without moving the price against themselves. Understanding these campaigns is key to understanding market movements. Accumulation is the process of buying large quantities of stock without significantly driving up the price. This is harder than it sounds. If a large buyer simply starts buying aggressively, their own buying will push the price up, meaning they'll pay higher and higher prices for the same stock. They need to buy in a way that doesn't reveal their intentions. The solution is to accumulate over time, buying when there's selling pressure and pulling back when there's buying pressure. The professional buyer becomes a supplier of stock on rallies, selling just enough to keep the price from rising, while being a buyer on dips. Over time, they accumulate a large position at a favorable average price. You can often spot accumulation by observing how a stock behaves relative to the overall market. If the market is falling, but a particular stock is holding steady or only declining slightly, someone is likely supporting it, buying the sell orders that come in. If the stock is reluctant to rally on good news or market upswings, it's because the accumulator is selling into that strength to prevent the price from rising too quickly. Distribution is the opposite process, selling large quantities without crashing the price. The distributor needs buyers to sell to, ideally at elevated prices. This is why distribution often happens after extended rallies, when the public is most optimistic and eager to buy. During distribution, you'll often see the market make repeated attempts to go higher, each one failing. The news will be good, it needs to be, to attract buyers, but the price won't respond as you'd expect. The volume will be high on up days, but the price won't progress. This is the distributor selling into the buying, capping the advance. Reading the tape, volume and spread. The key to understanding what's really happening in a market is the relationship between volume, how much is being traded, and spread, how far the price moves. This is not a simple relationship, but once you understand the principles, you can read the market's intentions with remarkable clarity. High volume on an up move with a narrow spread is suspicious. If there's that much buying interest, why isn't the price moving up more? The answer is that there's also significant selling meeting that buying. Professionals are using the demand to distribute their positions. This is weakness appearing on an up bar. High volume on a down move with a narrow spread is also significant. If there's that much selling, why isn't the price falling further? Because there's buying, absorbing that selling. Professionals are accumulating. This is strength appearing on a down bar. Low volume on an up move indicates a lack of professional participation. The market is rising, but the smart money isn't interested. This rally is not sustainable. It's a trap designed to lure in buyers before the next leg down. Low volume on a down move similarly indicates a lack of professional selling. The market is falling, but the professionals aren't participating. This decline is likely to reverse. The principles are simple, but applying them requires practice. You need to learn to read each bar in the context of what came before and what comes after. A single bar rarely tells the whole story. It's the pattern, the sequence, that reveals the professional's intentions. Testing supply. One of the most reliable signs that a market is ready to move up is the test. After a period of accumulation, the professional operator needs to know whether all the potential selling at current price levels has been absorbed. Are there still holders who will sell into any rally, creating resistance, or has the supply been cleared? To find out, the professional will mark the price down quickly. This challenges any remaining sellers to show themselves. If the volume on this mark, down, is low, it means there's little selling interest. The supply has been absorbed. The market is ready to rise. This is a successful test. If the volume on the test is high, it means there's still significant selling pressure. The market isn't ready to rise yet. The professionals may need to spend more time absorbing this supply before attempting a rally. You'll see tests at all time frames, on daily charts, weekly charts, even intraday charts. The principle is the same regardless of time frame. A quick probe lower that finds no supply, followed by a strong recovery, is one of the most bullish signals in technical analysis. The shakeout sometimes, instead of a gentle test, the market experiences a shakeout, a sharp, frightening drop that seems to signal the start of a major decline. The shakeout is designed to trigger stop-loss orders and panic selling, allowing professionals to buy at even better prices. Then, just as suddenly as it dropped, the market reverses and closes higher. The shakeout is a classic example of how professional operators exploit crowd psychology. They know where the stops are clustered. They know that most traders can't handle the emotional stress of watching their positions go deeply against them. They create conditions that trigger panic and then profit from the resulting forced selling. After a shakeout, the market often tests the low again, not to the same extreme, but enough to verify that the selling has been cleared. If the retest occurs on low volume, it's confirmation that the shake outworked and the market is ready to advance. Recognizing market tops and bottoms. Market tops and bottoms have characteristic signatures that become recognizable with practice. These aren't perfect predictors, but they significantly improve your odds of identifying major turning points. A market top often features a buying climax, a surge of buying on extremely high volume that fails to produce further price advances. The news is universally bullish. Everyone is talking about how much higher the market will go. And yet, despite all this buying pressure, the market can't seem to make new highs. This is because professionals are distributing into the buying, selling massive quantities to eager latecomers. Following the buying climax, you'll often see up thrusts, brief surges above the recent high that quickly fail and reverse. These are traps designed to catch breakout traders and trigger short covering, providing more opportunities for professionals to sell. A market bottom often features a selling climax, a panicked sell-off on very high volume, often accompanied by terrible news. Everyone is bearish. The media is full of doom. And yet, the market closes well off its lows and begins to stabilize. This is because professionals are absorbing the panic selling, accumulating positions at distressed prices. Following the selling climax, you'll often see successful tests, probes lower that find no follow, through selling, confirming that the supply has been exhausted and the market is ready to advance. The trap concept in trading. Traps are everywhere in trading. A trap is a price movement that looks like a genuine breakout or trend continuation, but is actually designed to lure traders into positions that will soon be reversed. Understanding traps is essential for survival. The most common trap is the failed breakout. The market pushes through a well-defined support or resistance level, triggering a wave of breakout trades. But instead of continuing in the breakout direction, the market quickly reverses, trapping those breakout traders in losing positions. Their subsequent forced liquidation, selling to get out of long positions or buying to cover shorts, fuels the move in the opposite direction. Why does this happen? Because professional operators know where the breakout traders will enter. They know where their stops are. By running the price through these levels, they can trigger a cascade of orders that they can then trade against at favorable prices. Another common trap is the stop-loss hunt. The market moves just far enough to trigger obvious stop-loss levels, taking out traders who had the right directional view but placed their stops too tight. Then the market reverses and goes in the direction those stopped. Out traders had originally anticipated. They were right about the direction, but wrong about the path, and the professionals exploited that. The key to avoiding traps is understanding context. A breakout in a market that has been trending strongly is very different from a breakout in a market that has been ranging. A breakout on high volume that closes at the extreme of its range is very different from a breakout on low volume that closes in the middle of its range. Learning to read these nuances takes time, but it's what separates successful traders from the consistently losing majority. Applying market principles to life. The principles that govern financial markets apply to many other domains. Any situation where there's asymmetric information, crowd psychology, and professional operators exploiting the unaware, these dynamics show up everywhere. Your career is a market. There's supply, people with skills, and demand, employers needing those skills. There are professionals, recruiters, well-connected insiders who have better information than the average job seeker. There are traps, misleading job postings, low-ball offers, dead end positions disguised as opportunities. Understanding market psychology helps you navigate this more effectively. Relationships have market, like dynamics too. There's supply and demand for attention, affection, commitment. There are people with more information about their own intentions, about social dynamics, and people with less. There are manipulators who exploit psychological vulnerabilities for their own benefit. The same awareness that protects you in markets protects you in relationships. Even personal development has market characteristics. There's a market for self-help products, coaching, courses. Some providers are genuine, many are not. Learning to distinguish genuine value from marketing hype, to read between the lines, to look for substance rather than style, is a skill that pays dividends. Key takeaway: markets are driven by psychology, not just fundamentals. Understanding how professional operators exploit crowd behavior gives you an edge not just in trading, but in any competitive domain. Reflection prompt. Think about a domain in your life where you feel consistently at a disadvantage. Are there informational asymmetries at work? Who has better information than you, and how are they using it? Chapter 7. The Wealth Mindset. What we'll learn: how your beliefs about money shape your financial reality, and how to develop the mindset and habits that lead to genuine prosperity. Why this matters. Financial well-being isn't just about income, it's about how you think about and relate to money. Two people with the same income can have radically different financial outcomes based on their money mindsets. Money is not the root of all evil. Let's clear up a damaging misconception right now. Money is not the root of all evil. The actual biblical quote is that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Money itself is neutral. It's a tool. It can be used for good or for harm, just like any other tool. Growing up, many of us absorb negative beliefs about money. We hear that rich people are greedy, that money corrupts, that it's more spiritual to be poor. These beliefs can create an unconscious aversion to wealth that sabotages our financial success. After all, if you believe that having money makes you a bad person, you'll find ways to avoid having money, even while consciously wanting it. Money is simply a measure of value delivered. If you provide significant value to others, money flows to you. If you use that money wisely, you can provide even more value, creating a virtuous cycle. Money allows you to take care of your family, contribute to causes you care about, and free yourself from the constant stress of financial insecurity. The wealthy people I've known, the genuinely wealthy, not the flashy pretenders, tend to be thoughtful, disciplined, and often remarkably frugal. They understand that money is a tool, not a scorecard. They don't use it to prove their worth. They use it to create freedom and opportunity. The producer versus consumer mindset. There are fundamentally two orientations to money: producer and consumer. Consumers spend money. Producers create value and receive money in exchange. The path to wealth is simple in concept. Shift your orientation from primarily consumer to primarily producer. This doesn't mean you should never consume. Everyone needs to consume basic necessities, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying the fruits of your labor. But if your entire relationship with money is about consumption, earning money to spend it, you'll never build wealth regardless of your income level. Producers think differently. They look at every situation and ask, how can I create value here? What problem can I solve? What need can I meet? Producers see opportunities where consumers see only products to buy. The mentality is fundamentally different. You can cultivate a producer mindset regardless of your job. Even as an employee, you can think like a producer, looking for ways to create more value for your employer, developing skills that increase your worth, seeking out problems that need solving. The people who get promoted, who get raises, who build successful careers, are the ones who think like producers rather than like entitled consumers of a paycheck. Pay yourself first. One of the most fundamental wealth-building principles is pay yourself first. Before you pay any bills, before you spend money on anything discretionary, take a portion of your income and put it into savings or investments. This is non-negotiable. It happens automatically before you have a chance to spend the money. The percentage matters less than the consistency. Start with whatever you can manage. 5%, 10%, whatever doesn't feel impossibly painful. The key is to make it automatic and to increase it over time. When you get a raise, increase your savings rate before you adjust your lifestyle to the new income. Why is this so powerful? Because it reverses the typical saving pattern. Most people spend first and save whatever is left over, which is usually nothing. By saving first, you're prioritizing your future self over your present desires. You're acknowledging that your financial security matters more than whatever impulse purchase is tempting you today. The money you save should then be put to work. A bank savings account paying a fraction of a % interest is not putting your money to work. It's letting your money slowly lose value to inflation. You need to invest in assets that have the potential to grow over time. The basics of investing. Investing doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, for most people, the simpler the investment strategy, the better. Complicated strategies tend to generate fees for the people selling them, not returns for the people buying them. The most straightforward approach is dollar-cost averaging into low-cost index funds. You invest a fixed amount of money at regular intervals, every month, every quarter, into funds that track broad market indices like the S&P 500. When prices are high, your fixed amount buys fewer shares. When prices are low, it buys more shares. Over time, this averages out to a favorable purchase price. This approach requires almost no skill or knowledge. It requires something harder: discipline. You have to keep investing when the market is falling and everyone is panicking. You have to keep investing when the news is terrible and it seems like the world is ending. This is emotionally difficult but financially essential. The best buying opportunities come at times of maximum pessimism. Low-cost index funds are preferable to actively managed funds for a simple reason. Most active managers don't beat the market over time, and their fees eat into your returns. An index fund charging 0.1% per year will almost certainly outperform a managed fund charging 1.5% per year over a decade or more. The math of compounding works both ways. Small differences in fees compound into enormous differences in final wealth. Avoiding common money mistakes. The path to wealth is more about avoiding mistakes than about finding brilliant investments. Here are the most common financial mistakes and how to avoid them. Lifestyle inflation is the tendency to increase your spending as your income increases. You get a raise and immediately upgrade your car, your apartment, your restaurant habits. Your standard of living rises to consume your new income, and you're no better off financially than before. The solution is to consciously maintain your lifestyle as your income grows, directing the increases into savings and investments. Debt, especially consumer debt, is a wealth destroyer. Credit card debt at 18% interest is a financial emergency. Paying it off should be your highest priority after basic survival needs. The interest you're paying is someone else's investment return, and it's coming directly out of your future. Trying to time the market is a fool's game. Even professional investors with enormous resources can't consistently predict short-term market movements. The amateur trying to jump in and out of the market based on news or hunches is almost guaranteed to underperform a simple buy and hold strategy. Not having an emergency fund leaves you vulnerable to financial shocks. A job loss, medical emergency, or major repair can force you into debt if you don't have savings to cover it. Aim for 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a safe, accessible account. Buying things to impress others is perhaps the most pervasive and destructive financial mistake. The car, the watch, the house. If you're buying them primarily for the status they convey, you're trading your financial freedom for the approval of people whose opinion shouldn't matter that much anyway. The truly wealthy tend to be understated. They understand that genuine wealth is about freedom, not display. The psychology of spending. Our spending decisions are far less rational than we like to believe. We're influenced by marketing, by social norms, by cognitive biases that operate below conscious awareness. Understanding these influences can help you make better decisions. Anchoring is the tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information you receive. If you see a shirt originally priced at $100, now on sale for $50, you feel like you're getting a great deal, even if the shirt is only worth $50. The initial price anchors your perception of value. Social proof makes us want what others have. If all your friends are driving new cars and eating at expensive restaurants, it feels normal to do the same, even if it's stretching your finances. The reference group you compare yourself to determines what feels like enough. Mental accounting leads us to treat money differently depending on where it came from. A tax refund feels like free money to be spent, while your regular paycheck feels like it should be saved. But money is fungible. $1 is $1 regardless of its source. Treating windfalls the same as regular income helps you make more rational decisions. Immediate gratification is hardwired into our brains. The pleasure of buying something now feels more real than the abstract benefit of having more money later. Overcoming this requires deliberately focusing on future benefits and finding ways to make saving feel rewarding in the present. Key takeaway: wealth is built by consistent, disciplined habits over time, not by brilliant investments or lucky breaks. The most important factor is not how much you earn, but how much you keep and how wisely you deploy it. Reflection prompt: what is one financial habit you could change that would make the biggest difference in your long-term financial well-being? What's stopping you? Chapter 8: The Art of Living Richly. What we'll learn: how to create a life that feels rich and fulfilling regardless of your income level. True prosperity isn't about the number in your bank account, it's about how you experience your daily life. Why this matters: you can have a high income and feel impoverished, or a modest income and feel abundantly wealthy. The difference is in how you think about and use your resources. Redefining wealth. What does it mean to be wealthy? Most people would answer in terms of money, a certain net worth, a certain income level. But if you dig deeper, what people actually want isn't money itself. They want what they believe money will provide: freedom, security, the ability to do what they want with their time, relief from financial anxiety, the capacity to take care of loved ones, the opportunity to experience life's pleasures. Here's the crucial insight: while money can help with all of these things, it's not the only path to them. And many people who have plenty of money still don't experience the freedom, security, and fulfillment they expected. The relationship between money and well-being is real but far weaker than most people assume. True wealth is having enough to meet your needs, plus a margin for comfort and generosity. True wealth is waking up without financial dread. True wealth is being able to help someone you care about when they need it. True wealth is having control over your time and your choices. By this definition, many people with modest incomes are genuinely wealthy, while some with high incomes are impoverished. The key is aligning your spending with your values, rather than with social expectations or fleeting desires. The liberation of enough. There's a concept that's been profoundly helpful to people who've adopted it: the idea of enough. It's the recognition that beyond a certain point, more money, more stuff, more status doesn't actually improve your life. It just creates more complexity, more maintenance, more things to worry about. Finding your enough point is liberating. It means you can stop chasing endlessly and start enjoying what you already have. It means you can make career decisions based on what fulfills you rather than exclusively on what pays the most. It means you can step off the hedonic treadmill and actually experience contentment. What constitutes enough is different for everyone. It depends on your values, your circumstances, your genuine needs and preferences. The key is to determine it consciously, rather than letting advertising, social media, or your neighbors determine it for you. One way to find your enough point is to track your spending for a few months and then review it carefully. Which expenses actually contributed to your well-being? Which were just habit or impulse or attempts to impress others? You'll likely find that a significant portion of your spending does nothing meaningful for your quality of life. That's money that could be redirected towards savings, toward experiences you genuinely value, or toward helping others. The luxury of simplicity. There's a kind of luxury that has nothing to do with expensive things. It's the luxury of a quiet morning with no obligations. The luxury of a walk in nature. The luxury of time to read, to think, to connect deeply with people you love. The luxury of not being constantly rushed and stressed. These luxuries are available to almost everyone, but they require a conscious choice to prioritize them over other things. If you're working 60 hours a week to afford a house that's bigger than you need, you're trading the luxury of time for the luxury of space. Only you can decide if that trade makes sense for you, but it should be a conscious decision, not an automatic default. Minimalism, in its healthy form, isn't about deprivation. It's about identifying what genuinely matters to you and eliminating everything that doesn't. It's about creating space, physical space, mental space, temporal space, for what you truly value. A minimalist life can feel incredibly luxurious because everything in it has been deliberately chosen. Relationships as wealth. When researchers study what actually makes people happy, one factor consistently emerges as more important than any other: the quality of your relationships. People with strong social connections are happier, healthier, and live longer than those who are isolated. This is true regardless of income level. Investing in relationships, spending time with people you love, being present and attentive, doing things for others without expecting anything in return. This is perhaps the highest return investment you can make. Unlike financial investments, relationship investments don't just grow over time. They compound in richness and meaning. The wealthiest people I know, in terms of genuine life satisfaction, are those who have cultivated deep connections with family and friends. They've invested in their communities. They've made themselves useful to others. Their lives are rich with meaning and belonging. This kind of wealth can't be bought, but it can be built through attention, effort, and genuine care. Health as wealth. Health is easy to take for granted until it's compromised. Then suddenly, nothing else matters. All the money in the world can't buy back your health once it's seriously damaged. Viewing health as a form of wealth changes how you prioritize it. Getting enough sleep isn't a luxury, it's an investment in your most valuable asset. Eating well and exercising aren't optional extras. They're essential maintenance on the vehicle that carries you through life. The good news is that the basics of health are simple and mostly free. Sleep, movement, real food, time outdoors, meaningful social connection, stress management. These don't require expensive gym memberships, exotic superfoods, or complicated protocols. They require consistent attention and the willingness to prioritize long-term well-being over short-term comfort. The freedom of generosity. There's a paradox about generosity. The more you give, the richer you feel. This isn't just a nice sentiment. It's been demonstrated in research. People who give money away, even small amounts, report higher levels of happiness than those who spend exclusively on themselves. Generosity breaks the scarcity mindset. When you give, you're affirming that you have enough. Enough to share, enough to spare. This affirmation, repeated over time, shifts your fundamental orientation from scarcity to abundance. Generosity doesn't require wealth. You can give time, attention, skills, kindness. You can give a small percentage of your income, even if your income is modest. The amount matters less than the act. Giving regularly, even small amounts, creates a sense of flow and abundance that hoarding can never provide. Key takeaway: true prosperity is about how you experience your life, not just the numbers in your accounts. By redefining wealth to include time, relationships, health, and purpose, you can live richly at any income level. Reflection prompt: if you could design your ideal life without worrying about money, what would it look like? How much of that life is actually available to you right now with the resources you already have? Chapter 9. The Path Forward. What we've learned. A comprehensive understanding of how your mind works, how emotions are created, how manipulation operates, how markets function, and how to build genuine prosperity. Why this matters. Knowledge without action is entertainment. The final step is integrating these insights into your daily life. The integration challenge. You now have a substantial amount of information about how your mind works, how emotions are created, how manipulation functions, how markets move, and how genuine prosperity is built. The challenge, and this is the real work, is integrating all of this into your daily life. Knowledge alone doesn't change anything. You can understand the mechanics of emotion perfectly and still get swept away by emotional reactions. You can know all about the growth mindset and still fall back into fixed mindset patterns when you're stressed or threatened. You can understand manipulation tactics intellectually and still get manipulated by someone who knows how to push your buttons. The gap between knowing and doing is where most personal development efforts fail. You read the book, you feel inspired, you make resolutions, and then life happens and you revert to old patterns. This isn't a character flaw. It's how the brain works. Established neural pathways are strong, new ones are weak. The only way to strengthen new pathways is through repetition, consistent practice over time. The power of small, consistent actions. The most reliable approach to lasting change is small, consistent actions. Not dramatic overhauls, not ambitious resolutions, but tiny habits that you can sustain indefinitely. A 5-minute meditation practice done every day is worth more than an hour. Long session you do once and never repeat. Saving a small percentage of every paycheck is worth more than ambitious savings goals you abandon after 3 months. James Clear, in his book Atomic Habits, describes this as the power of marginal gains. A 1% improvement each day compounds into a 37-fold improvement over a year. But the key is consistency. The 1% has to happen every day, or close to it. Choose one practice from this book, just one, and commit to doing it for 30 days. Maybe it's a morning gratitude practice. Maybe it's tracking your self-talk. Maybe it's paying yourself first by automatically transferring a small amount to savings each pay period. Whatever you choose, make it small enough that you can do it even on your worst days. Consistency matters more than intensity. Once that practice is established, once it feels automatic, like brushing your teeth, add another. Building habits one at a time is slow, but it's reliable. Trying to change everything at once is fast but unreliable. Choose reliability. The art of getting back on track. You will fall off track. Everyone does. The difference between people who succeed and people who don't isn't whether they ever slip, it's how quickly they get back on track. Most people, when they miss a day or break a commitment to themselves, use it as evidence that they've failed and might as well give up entirely. This is the fixed mindset in action. A single mistake becomes a verdict on your character. The growth mindset response is different. You missed a day. Okay, that doesn't define you. What matters is what you do next. Do you get back on track today, or do you let one missed day become 2, then a week, then a permanent abandonment? Develop the skill of the quick recovery. When you notice you've drifted off course, don't waste time on guilt or self-recrimination. Just get back on course. The faster you recover, the less damage the drift does. Over time, the drifts become shorter and less frequent. This, more than perfection, is what creates lasting change. The ongoing nature of growth. There's no finish line in personal development. You don't reach a point where you're done and can stop the practices that got you there. The practices are the point. They're how you maintain your mental and emotional health, just as exercise is how you maintain physical health. This can sound discouraging if you're looking for a permanent fix, but it's actually liberating. If there's no finish line, there's no rush. You can take your time, you can enjoy the process, you can appreciate how far you've come without comparing yourself to some idealized endpoint. Growth is not about becoming a different person. It's about becoming more fully yourself, shedding the accumulated conditioning, the limiting beliefs, the reactive patterns that obscure your authentic nature. The person you're becoming isn't someone new. It's who you've always been underneath the layers of protection and adaptation. The service orientation, one of the most reliable paths to fulfillment and prosperity, is shifting from a "what can I get" orientation to a "what can I give" orientation. This isn't about self-sacrifice or martyrdom. It's about recognizing that the most satisfying way to live is in contribution to something larger than yourself. When you focus on serving others, your family, your community, your customers, your colleagues, something interesting happens. Your own problems recede in importance. Your anxiety diminishes. Your sense of purpose and meaning increases. And practically, people who consistently deliver value to others tend to be well compensated for it. Service isn't separate from prosperity. It's the foundation of genuine prosperity. The wealthiest people, in financial terms, are generally those who have figured out how to serve large numbers of people effectively. The most fulfilled people, in terms of life satisfaction, are those who have integrated service into their daily lives. Find ways to be useful, solve problems, help people, make things better. The money will follow, but even if it doesn't, the life you build in the process will be worth living. Final thoughts. We've covered an enormous amount of territory in these pages: the psychology of emotion, the mechanics of manipulation, the hidden architecture of markets, the mindset of genuine prosperity, the practical tools for change. All of it connected, all of it building toward a single central insight. You have far more power over your experience than you've been led to believe. Your thoughts shape your emotions shape your actions. Your actions shape your results. And your thoughts are ultimately within your control. Not perfectly, not instantly, but progressively through practice and persistence. The operating manual for your mind was never handed to you, but now you have it. The rest is up to you. Final reflection. What is the single most important insight you've gained from this exploration? How will you apply it starting today? The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. John Milton.